What is going on, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls? Back again with another Legends of Runeterra video for you all. We are back today with another tournament roundup. The Duels of Runeterra 9 just took place this last weekend for both EU and NA, and we are lucky enough to be able to have some better infographics this time around. Impetuouspanda, I mean, he put in a ton of work for these. Clearly, I mean, everything's color coded, everything's here, win rate percent, ban percent, everything is here. I would definitely give I have his Twitter in the description down below. I definitely would give that a follow. Follow him for pretty much I'm assuming he's going to be doing this from now on. If not, I will definitely try to up my game with the infographics and try and do something similar if this isn't something he's going to be doing in the future. So let's just go ahead and talk about what we saw this weekend between NA and EU. So this is a bit of a general clumping of the data with between both of the top eights between NA and EU, and we saw slightly different metagames between NA and EU this week. We saw EU bringing a lot more streamlined, aggressive tournament lineups with a lot of PNZ burn, a lot of scouts. Also a fairly big showing of Endure, and let's see, a fair amount. We can pull up. We had elusives as well. A lot of elusives on their end. We had ALS, the runner-up, bringing Kinku elusives, and a few other people in the top 8 brought I think like 2 or 3 people brought that. We didn't really see any of these kind of aggressive lineups over in NA. We saw pretty much the complete opposite. We saw heavy mid-range, heavy control lineups instead, which shows our kind of contributes to this large showing of the deep sea monsters Nautilus archetype here. We also saw quite a lot of spicy lineups on the NA side with a significant showing on the kind of Freljord mid-range stuff with the Ashe Sejuani. We saw Ashe Quinn, which was pretty crazy. We saw Fiora Freljord Immortal stuff as well making a showing. That was actually, I believe that was EU, but we saw a lot of Ashe Sejuani, a lot of the Plunder Sejuani stuff. We even saw Swain Sejuani. Not so much the elusives or the Endure, but we saw a very interesting uptick in the kind of mid-range Freljord stuff. I talked about a little bit in our Twitch Rivals roundup that the Freljord archetypes were kind of falling behind it, as evidenced by Freljord really only popping up as like a one-up tech in a lot of the Bannerman lists that people brought. But it would seem that NA is kind of getting a read from that tournament, maybe specifically, or previous Duels of Runeterra, and kind of valuing the mid-range Ashe Freljord stuff a little bit higher to target this Endure stuff. I talked to Winding God briefly about his pick on this Ashe Sejuani mid-range stuff, and it was pretty much specifically targeting the Bannerman and Endure because of how good of a matchup it has against those two specific archetypes. Winding God obviously took the NA championship. We can jump over here and see his decks really quick. He brought the Ashe Sejuani midrange we talked about. He brought the Weimer, and he brought the Mono Demacia here. He brought a pretty much across the board mid-range lineup with the Demacia, Ashe Noxus Freljord stuff, Ashe Noxus mid-range stuff, and the Weimer. Weimer being pretty mid-range when you think about how the deck wants to operate. You want to, in the middle stages of the game, you want to drop your Heimer or your Vi with some sort of protection, ideally, be it deny or some other type of answer with the Twin Disciplines or something like that, and then after that, just building up a board of huge elusives or fearsomes and just kind of overwhelming your opponent in the next couple of turns. Shell's lineup here, which is we got Endure represented here, which was definitely able to get in top 8 of EU. Definitely no representation of Endure on the NA top 8, and then we had the two kind of aggro decks, obviously Burn, Championless Burn. Let's see, we can see which version of it he went with. It was the he had 2 Static Shock, 2 Transfusion. So that's pretty much, these are the flex slots on Championless Burn, really. It's like, how many copies of Static Shock do you want? How many copies of Transfusion do you want? I personally, when I was doing my original Climb to Masters, I was playing with the 3 Static Shock version, which I liked a lot. It can really help in the mirror. you push one damage to face, you remove one of their creatures to protect your own face, and you draw a card. Drawing is like insane in Championless Burn, as evidenced by the fact that Prismat brought the Investigator burn list to this tournament that made a bit of a splash in the NA top 8, which was pretty cool to see. That was pretty cool innovation with the burn archetype. I'm not necessarily sure if it's better, but I guess we'll see after this top week, now that it's kind of been exposed, if the version that draws you more cards with the, which card is it, the Investigator, with the Insightful Investigator being able to draw you more cards. I mean, it's a 4-drop, and I don't know necessarily if this is like better. We'll have to see with the win rates. I'm not sure if it's better, just because if you're getting to this point in the game, you're already behind, and if you are cutting consistency cards to with the game plan that you might be behind, I don't know if that's necessarily what you're looking for here. I'm assuming they cut stuff like Static Shock. I mean, I guess since it takes up the slot of Static Shock, then it's interesting. I don't know. It's worth to pay attention to the win rates on that to see if this is better than Static Shock, but I'm not sure if it necessarily is, because you can use banked spell mana for Static Shock to potentially draw one card that isn't fleeting. So if you draw something that is necessary to like win you the game, then you won't burn it because it's fleeting. And with this, you drop it on 4. You can only play this on turn 4 at the earliest, because you need the 4 creature mana. And then so I don't know if this is necessarily better. We'll have to wait and see, but if I had to guess, it's not necessarily better. It's just a different take on the same archetype. So that's Mahone Michelle's lineup as well. And then we had Ialis's another heavy kind of aggro lineup with the one of the most stable decks for a tournament lineup, which is Bannerman. So the EU side was definitely a lot more streamlined, focused on definitely a lot more of like the aggro heavy stuff, where the NA lineups were definitely a little bit more mid-rangey and targeting kind of like the endure and control stuff. So kind of makes sense that the metagame kind of shook out like that, I guess. Overall, it's a pretty interesting tournament. I mean, I would definitely watch some of the top 8 if you get a chance. I can link the Twitch VODs down in the description as well. There are a lot of interesting decks. Super exciting, interesting lists, like the Undying Ezreal stuff, like I said, the Ash Quinn. I will definitely be featuring a few of those decks later on. They're definitely like tournament lineups, so they're not what we'll see how they do in the ladder, I guess, and just kind of go from there. But definitely an interesting tournament on the side of the NA. Not so much on the EU. Definitely kind of what you would expect from a tournament lineup at this point in the metagame development, with definitely more focused on the scouts, burn, quick games, more aggressive lineups. Definitely just kind of like banning out Shadow Isles stuff. If you are running into something that's playing like Karina Control or Deep, you can just target ban that to get rid of their healing archetype and just kind of feed off of their other lists. If they're playing control lists, then they're not going to have much healing, so you can kind of potentially just sneak easy wins with those. And then on the other side with NA, we definitely had more of a ban Will of Ionia type of lineups, where since we had so much sea monsters and stuff, you're just banning away the Will of Ionia stuff, evidenced by the huge 50% ban targeted towards Ionia. Obviously, we can kind of glean a lot of like what's going on in the metagame from these 3 statistics here. The win rate, I guess, is not necessarily as important, just because it's the top 8 for each regions, and it's like, I mean, like the win rate is going to be kind of inflated for specific archetypes, because the lineups were like so specific in NA, and so it's going to like inflate certain regions based on Winding God doing so well with specific archetypes, and it's going to be pushing down like the Shadow Isles archetypes, because I think the last 2 sets were him just beating deep like 4 times in a row. So that's obviously going to push down the win rates of both Bilge and Shadow Isles. So the win rate's kind of hard to see. It's kind of hard to get an idea of like exactly what we're working with in the tournament meta, but from the other two, they're definitely like a better representation of what we're looking at. So obviously like Piltover and Zon and Demacia, as you'd expect, would be like pretty much auto brings for everyone. I mean, they're the two most powerful and versatile regions. I mean, like Demacia is probably just the most powerful, just powerful and consistent with its overstated units and everything like that. And then PNZ can fit into so many different archetypes and be so flexible with many different things. Like it goes in burn. It has like a mid-range Vimer strategy. It has Ezreal Karma stuff, more combo-oriented stuff. It just kind of fits into like every archetype you would want it, and any archetype you'd want to make a deck around. So obviously PNZ is going to be brought. Bilgewater is super interesting. I mean, I think it makes sense because of the Deep being one of the better control decks in the meta. You don't have to commit like another power region with Shadow Isles like you would have to do if you're going to play Karina. You'd have to do like Shadow Isles PNZ, and that's 2 power regions kind of just done. So you can bring Deep and commit less of like a power region to like one ban is what I'm trying to say here. And obviously Freljord and Bilge being connected as well, it's kind of a similar strategy. Like this is necessarily 2 regions that wouldn't be high up in the representations, but because they can kind of get some like powerful archetypes by building together, they can like obviously bring each other up in the representations. And then it's interesting that Ionia was so low. Yeah, I mean, I guess it makes sense too, though, obviously, because of this percentage right here. If you're going to be expecting your Ionia to be banned most of the time, I guess you don't necessarily need to emphasize as hard, like, bringing an archetype that even uses it. So, yeah, I mean, it makes sense too, because I think towards the end of the beta, we were seeing more Bannermen with, like, a splash of Ionia to put in like 1 or 2 deny, but it seems like people are more favoring just the straight consistency in Demacia and just going for that, or putting like straight Demacia and then doing like another really powerful like Karma as combo like deck in there as well, so that they don't really have that great of a single ban. Yeah, this is interesting. I mean, you would definitely expect Nox to be this low, because Nox really fits into like 2 archetypes in the tournament meta, and that being Burn, which is a super good just standalone deck, and then like TF Swain, which didn't see like any significant play this time around. I think one tournament lineup, which was kind of a new tournament lineup, which was the Immortal lineup. This Presto G-Day Maverick kind of brew with the new iteration on the Immortal Fiora with Shadow Isles. So like Ez Karma, Swain TF, Immortal Fiora, targeting the like Corvina tournament lineup, but only one person snuck into the top 8 with this lineup, and I think quite a few people brought it. That's definitely more of a symptom of people just not valuing the Corvina lineup, I think, in this tournament this time around, and obviously not being able to keep up with the... It probably didn't do that well in Europe either, because people were running such streamlined aggro lineups, and you just ban the Shadow Isles list, and then you just kind of go over the top with these decks. Neither of these decks have that great of a time handling like an aggro lineup, I don't think. So it makes sense that this one kind of got pushed down, but there's definitely a spot for that, and I think it could definitely do well in the future. Definitely an interesting lineup. But yeah, we saw Freljord be pushed up a little bit in the representations. This would definitely be lower if the NA bracket didn't bring up the representation quite a bit more. It would definitely be floating around here with Noxus, and we'll have to see in the next 2 weeks kind of how, I guess, Freljord develops, if it'll kind of just shake back into a They Who Endure meta, or if something else will pop up, like maybe more people will start bringing this aggressive like elusives type lineups, and yeah, we'll just kind of see from there. I mean, these kind of make sense. I feel like Ionia would have been a little bit higher in the representations, but it seems like NA valued different mid-rangey control strategies this time around, so it makes sense that Ionia didn't kind of keep up with the representations here. this all like going over the ban percentage. I mean, this makes sense completely. Like right here, and right here. These are like the top 3 regions in the game. It's, I mean, you probably can't really argue that at this point. I mean, I guess there's a consideration for Shadow Isles, but it doesn't really hold quite the same power level as these 3 in terms of like the versatility and the like just the versatility, I guess, in general of what these regions can do and the power level of like the certain top end cards that they have, like Will of Ionia and stuff like that here, and then obviously just like the consistency in Demacia, and then like and overstated stuff, and then obviously the P and Z versatility and stuff. I mean, yeah, no one's really gonna ban these, I don't think. No one's really gonna ban deep, especially when you are looking at like a Demacia or like something else like a Burn or something. So it makes sense that these are pretty much never banned. This makes sense though, like why like so many Freljord strategies were able to make through, I guess, in NA, just because of the particular metagame we had this week, and then also people not really, I guess, respecting. We'll just cut this part of the video out. I'm just kind of rambling. So yeah, I think that kind of does it for the main points in reviewing the data that we were presented with the top 16 for this week. We kind of covered everything, like with the metagame progression and where we kind of stood from this week in terms of like from Twitch rivals to where we are now and how things are kind of shaping up. At this point, I think we're just kind of waiting for a potential like balance patch in the next week, and then it'll be interesting to see how the next Duels of Runeterra will shape up after a pretty significant, I'm assuming, a pretty significant change to some of the stuff that we're looking at. But yeah, now we also have a pretty big update to the Mobalytics website, and we can just jump over there right now and do a quick little overview of the constructed ladder really quick, and just kind of show off the new portion of the website and just kind of check that stuff out. So yeah, they just released this today. We have meta stats, and you can also sort it by master and below master ranks. I'm assuming at some point, once this is more refined, they're going to maybe put this behind a paywall like they kind of do with the, I can't remember the name of the website, but the same thing they do for Hearthstone, essentially, where they keep track of all of the data for all games played through the tracker, the deck tracker thing, and then put it behind a paywall and do like some sort of monthly subscription thing. I would assume that's what they're going to do if the game gets big enough, but for the meantime, since it's free, we can just kind of go over this really quick and see what we're working with. We can just go over the decks. We don't necessarily need to spend a bunch of time talking about the breakdowns between champions and regions. I mean, the decks will kind of say similar things in that regard to what we're looking at. We can just go with the Masters ladder, because I mean that's pretty much what everyone's climbing for. We can do like a little touch base on each one, but they should be pretty similar just because there's so much transparency between like deck lists up in like Masters rank and everything, so it's not like anyone knows anything, any secret hot take or hot tech or deck or anything like that. So yeah, we can go ahead and check the win rate for decks. Let's see. Okay. So yeah, I guess we can do all ranks. I guess all ranks might be better because master rank is just such a low pool of matches. I mean, we have some, but it's like we get these, if we just sort by masters, we'll get like super high inflated win rates based on like really low sample sizes of decks. So we might as well just go with all ranks and just for simplicity's sake. Alright, so we can sort by this. So we have scouts at the top, over 4K matches. This is a pretty low sample size. This, I would assume this, if this was around 40K, like Corvina here was, this would probably drop to a few percent, probably like 55, 56, I would assume. Oh, see, it's even dropped like a percent, 1.4% just off of like 2,000 more games. I mean, yeah, so I mean, I would assume this is going to See, yeah, okay. Okay, so this is a better sample size right here, like 14K, 58%. So we can kind of expect around like a 57, 58% win rate for scouts, which makes a lot of sense. A super aggressive deck, and it plays off of really powerful region like Demacia, and it has really powerful tools like Rally. So, I mean, obviously we're sitting at like tier 1 with scouts. I mean, this is pretty much a must. If you're looking to climb ladder, this is probably like a must build. I would assume that like the top 3 would be it, especially because they cover different strategies in terms of like what their deck build is trying to do. I would definitely potentially go with some sort of Bannerman or Scouts, which is kind of like aggro mid range, and then we do Burn, which is right here, sitting around like 57, 58% win rate again. This is huge sample size too, so this is like pretty stable win rate percent, and so like we're looking at like 58% for Burn. So build Burn, build Scouts or Bannerman Demacia, and then build Corvina, because it's there. It's like this is the most linear control deck you could possibly play pretty much in any game. I feel like you're doing your game plan is the same pretty much every time. You are just controlling the board obviously with your like tokens, your spells and everything. If you can get ahead with the Brood Awakening and Elise stuff, then obviously you can storm the board down or just kill them right out if they have like a really slow draw or something. And then if that strategy doesn't work out, you just kind of whittle away your opponent's resources until you drop Ladros or Karina, and you just kind of win the game. So that's pretty much how it goes every time. And it'll give you a good idea of like different matchups and how to play control matchups. So this is like a super easy one to build. We got a different Bannerman list up here, but then Bannerman is like, it has some combat tricks. It has really overstated units. It has really overstated units on curves, so you learn about like your curve and like what you should be mulliganing for and how to do like combat tricks and specific interactions and stuff like that. So super good deck to like learn on as well, probably one of the best ones to learn on. And then aggro is like, it's probably the last one you should play out of those 3, because the strategy it implements is completely the polar opposite to how you'd play most matchups, in terms of like you're ignoring the board half the time, and sorry, you're not ignoring the board half the time, you're ignoring the board 99 to 100% of the time, and not really caring what your opponent's doing. You're just literally going for their Nexus health, and if they develop a bigger board than you, you're literally just looking for ways to go over the top of them without interacting with them at all. So it's definitely a different strategy. It's a super cheap deck, so I mean, like right here, 6,400, whatever this resource is called, then 6,400 of that, it's like the cheapest deck you could possibly get with this stable enough of a win rate. So definitely would recommend playing it. And then for your more expensive decks, you probably want to build these two. These are the other 2 like tier 1 archetypes that fall into different categories of different play styles. So I mean, ideally you want to build your collection and kind of just play every deck, get every card. If you're going to take the game like kind of seriously, then familiarize yourself with everything and then just kind of go from there. But yeah, we can kind of scroll down and see what else we've got. And deep, here's 57%. That's only across 5K games though. We've got like up here, we've got another couple thousand. It'd be nice if this could be like clumped at some point. I mean, I understand that this is like the first iteration of it, but if like these archetypes that run very similar champions could be like clumped into archetypes, and then if you clicked on it, then it was like a further breakdown of like what cards, like if like which cards are included in certain lists at what percentages, and then it'd just be further broken down from there. But it's kind of hard for just anyone to get a read on, like, if you're just getting into the game and this is the tool you're using, it's kind of hard to get the most useful information out of it without having a little bit more understanding of card games and stuff. So I mean, this is obviously, I mean, Heimervi is still pretty stable. Like, it seems it's like, I mean, it should still be pretty much tier 1. It's I mean, pretty solid, close to 55% win rate with 33,000 games. I mean, Yeah, that's super solid. And then we start getting into the lower win rate stuff with like, oh, that's crazy. What is this? Okay, 7K games, 50% win rate. So solid tier 2. I mean, yeah, and then we start getting into like tier 3 stuff that really starts to tank. Oh, wait, what? That's crazy. Oh, I see. Okay. So the win rate, it's like, yeah, if you're under a certain percentage of games, then it just like is tossed out as an outlier. So that makes sense. Um, so yeah, this is like a super cool tool that Mobalytics just added. I mean, it's definitely like the best thing that we have right now in terms of keeping up with information about the ladder specifically. And then you can break it down even further to master or below master if you're really looking for something to play in that range. It looks like there's not the largest sample size in below masters, probably because not a lot of masters or people below masters are using deck trackers, which is what this relies on to be as accurate as possible. So I guess we didn't even need to do that whole thing at the beginning. We could have just gone with masters because it seems like that's where most of the most accurate information lies. Man, yeah, this is crazy. It's interesting that it's like this. It seems to toss out Okay. Let's see. Where's Lux Karma as well? Lux Karma is 56% across 10K games. I mean, that's like tier 1 for sure. Yeah. So yeah, and then we can jump over, I guess, into the meta tier list and kind of see what they have on here. So yeah, this is kind of what you'd expect when you are looking at the information that was on there. Green Control's up here, Burns up here, and then Bannerman's up here as well. They don't put Scouts up here, which is interesting because it has a super high win rate across quite a few games. But I guess the people operating this tier list don't value it quite as high for the latter. But like I said, if your goal is to climb and learn the game, then you should build Karina Control, Burn Aggro, Bannerman, and you'll definitely climb. You'll learn a lot, and you'll definitely most likely climb if you are willing to learn from your mistakes and just kind of pay attention to your gameplay and figure out what you might be doing wrong, potentially watching some content, seeing if there's some guides that might be able to help you out. But I mean, yeah, that's pretty much it. That's going to do it for this video. I mean, we covered pretty much everything we wanted to cover with the tournament breakdown, kind of an overview of what we saw between the two top 8s of NA and EU. We saw like some innovations with tournament lineups that might not have paid off potentially for Presto and G-Day Maverick with their Immortal Fiora kind of lineup. And then we saw some innovations in NA with the Freljord stuff, kind of pushing Endure and stuff out of the meta a bit and kind of feeding off of that matchup. So yeah, it was definitely an interesting tournament. It'll be interesting in 2 weeks to see, once we get the balance patch, what people are going to be bringing and what new innovations will be brought. See how the lists change and the lineups change. But that's pretty much going to be it. If you enjoyed the content, please feel free to like and subscribe. It is super fun to just get to do all this stuff and to see people that are interacting with the channel, and I love to see it, and I look forward to hearing from y'all again in the future. But have a good rest of your day. I'll see you later. Bye-bye.